Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of IBD Heal, a podcast brought to you by High Carb Health. I'm your host, Shakul, and I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Renae Thomas. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I love it. We did one quite some time ago, and I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, there's a video I did with Renae in Australia. That was in 2019, the last time we were able to meet. Yeah, she's done some really cool stuff and a lot of research on a couple of things we really want to talk about today. Dr. Renae has been working in Loma Linda for a while. I don't think you're working there anymore, but you spent a lot of time there and we're with the Seventh-day Adventist population, which is a blue zone. So we're going to talk about blue zones today. And you've also done a good amount of research into IBD, and we've got one of your articles on our website. You know, that's one of our something that we share with all of our clients and people who really want to understand the relationship between diet and IBD. And it's a fantastic article, so we'll discuss that as well. But first of all, I'll get you just to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about what you've been doing over the last few years and how things have been in Loma Linda and how you kind of got into that.
Absolutely. I could talk about that forever. But to start off with, thank you for the introduction. I am officially board certified in family medicine, preventive medicine, and public health and lifestyle medicine. So I did 3 board specialties and I did my residency at Loma Linda. So I worked at Loma Linda University Health for 5 years. Obviously, all opinions are my own and none of those of Loma Linda, but I had a wonderful time there. I had amazing doctors that I worked with, wonderful researchers, and an amazing patient population.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the population in Loma Linda, the Seventh-day Adventist population, is the longest living population in the world.
It's definitely one of the blue zones. It's the longest living in America, that's for sure.
America,
so it's the only blue zone in America and one of 5 in the entire world. And it has the most centenarians, so most people living over 100 in the entire world.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I guess the important thing is also to note that they don't only live for a long time, they live well into their old age. So it's not that we're keeping them alive on ventilators because Loma Linda is a great hospital, which it is, but they're living well. I had patients in their hundreds with, the only time they've been hospitalized maybe was to have a baby, like very minimal health problems, and exercising every day and really living in good vitality. And I think that's the most important part. We don't want to just live long, we want to optimize all of our years.
That's really important, isn't it? It's not how long you live for, it's the quality of those years that you have. And you don't want to spend half your life kind of suffering through having a disease and being on all sorts of different medications and kind of making it through and not having a very good quality of life. So I think, how about we start off with, based on your observations, what are some of the key indicators to living a long, healthy life and having that good quality of life that you're talking about? What would be some of the things that you have to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the coolest things about working at Loma Linda is the primary care clinic actually isn't in Loma Linda where I did my family medicine, like primary care, and I saw all my patients there. It's actually in San Bernardino, which is a completely different population to Loma Linda. It's really sad. It's one of the lowest socioeconomic areas in the United States and actually also one of the most violent and dangerous places to live. So it is a completely different population. You basically cross the train tracks and you don't even feel like you're in the same country, to be honest, at least not for me. And I have some interesting stories that I won't share of initially moving there and not knowing that I shouldn't just ride my bicycle into that area. So very, very different population. And I loved my patients at both. Don't get me wrong, loved working at both of them, but it actually gave me that insight into how so many things determine your health, in particular those social determinants of health. And I think that is often left out of these discussions. Obviously, I'm very involved in the nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and I think that is a huge part. The principles of lifestyle medicine go a long way. Estimates out there, 80% of your health is your lifestyle. But I think that forgotten part of your zip code and your social economic status and your social determinants of health go a really long way as well. It's very challenging to be healthy when you're in a situation where you're working really long hours just to make enough. And then you are living in an environment, total aside, but I've driven to a lot of the supermarkets there to try and understand the environment, and healthy food is challenging in those areas. And it was so interesting to see that divide. I'm at Loma Linda and I'm seeing these people 80, 90, super healthy, and then I'm seeing 25-year-olds at my clinic who have every chronic disease under the sun. And it was such a stark comparison to be able to do that. And it gave me a lot of insight to answer your question, which I promise I'm getting to. But, you know, the biggest part, you know, Loma Linda is one of those blue zones, and a lot of it does fit into that kind of power 9 that they talk about. So they talk about movement, they talk about having a purpose, you know, eating a predominantly plant-based diet, and we can get into that with Loma Linda in particular. Talking about, you know, the importance of family, belonging, friends. That's a lot of the stuff that I did see when I was in Loma Linda in particular. Just really strong family values, really strong friendship groups, moving a lot. Like I used to go hiking a lot when I lived in Loma Linda. There's great hills and hundreds of people biking, walking, just a lot of physical activity. The gym is super busy. Out in the pool, they used to have water aerobics with the oldest people I've ever seen doing water aerobics. Just a lot of movement, and that culture of physical activity as well. Like there's a running group that's huge. Just lots and lots of people involved in that physical movement. You know, every staff member got a free gym membership for the hospital gym, and it was a great gym. So lots of priority on fitness I saw. Nutrition wise, so part of the Seventh-day Adventist faith is a vegetarian diet, and so it's about at least 50% follow that vegetarian diet, and about 50% of the 50%, so 25% actually are strictly like vegan or entirely plant-based. And that's a lot. You know, we're talking maybe 5% of the US at best versus 25%, you know, you're talking 50% following a predominantly plant-based diet. And even the meat-eating diets are significantly lower in meat. In Adventist health studies where they looked at it, you only had to eat meat twice a week to be classified as a full meat eater. That wasn't even a semi-vegetarian. Semi-vegetarian in the Adventist health studies is meat like once a week. So you can even put in perspective, that's so much less than a typical Western population. And so that's kind of the big parts. And then obviously faith is huge. So church, community, and then family is really, really important. And I think
there is a spiritual aspect to health. You know, there is a spiritual aspect to health. You know, like doesn't matter whether it's a religious thing or a spiritual thing or just some kind of you know, there's some kind of faith that you have with whatever it is that you choose. But I've noticed it in our work here at High Carb Health is that, you know, the people that have some kind of faith, something they can hold on to and believe in, they do better. You know, their healing journey is more effective. They seem to have, you know, faster, they get better faster. And then they also are able to maintain their health because they just believe in there's something that holds them together, you know. But anyway, carry on.
Absolutely. No, I think you're completely right. When I was in medical school, I did a year at Cabrini in Malvern in Melbourne, and that's a faith-based institute as well. And so I was first introduced to that idea as, you know, faith in medicine, and then being at Loma Linda, it's a faith-based institute. You know, doctors pray with their patients, there's chaplains, and just having that real focus on it. And I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be a religion per se, but even just believing in yourself, having people that believe in you can go a long way in your health journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so you talked about, you know, the nutrition side of things being predominantly plant-based, and that's quite fascinating that, you know, even the people that ate meat, like, I mean, when I was eating a standard Western diet or standard American diet, right, almost every day, I don't think there's very, very few days that I wouldn't eat meat, you know, at least once or maybe twice, sometimes 3 times, you know, or more. And so to think that a meat eater constitutes like twice a week, would that just be like 2 meals in the whole week, or would that be, is that right?
There was people that did eat more, but that was the minimum to be in that classification. And knowing that it's so little makes the results of the Adventist health study so striking, because I think when people read it, they think of meat eaters eating meat every day, when in the studies they really weren't. A lot of them were not eating it very often, which is crazy.
Absolutely. And you hear this a lot, right? I mean, when you, I don't know, you know, we've both been plant-based for a long time. You know, when you start talking about it, you know, you get the obvious kind of like people that you know, are trying to be healthier, they'll tell you, oh, I only eat a little bit, right? I mean, how many times have you heard that? Yeah.
Everyone eats a little bit of meat and everyone eats really well. Every patient eats really well, trust me. I'm like, that's great. Let's talk specifics. Really well means very different things for different people. And that's fine. I'm with everyone on their health journey. I'm not judgmental.
Absolutely.
I do not care.
But
like,
yeah,
if you're coming to me for health advice, we gotta go somewhere.
absolutely. So, the whole thing that, oh, I only eat a little, and great if you only do, but I mean, talk about the difference between the people that were exclusively on a plant-based diet and the people that ate a little bit of meat.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things I also forgot that makes it a really cool study group is the vast majority actually don't smoke cigarettes. Loma Linda is a smoke-free town, which is awesome. No caffeine and no alcohol. So that's kind of across the board. So you're taking out, in a lot of studies, when we look at nutrition studies, what can be challenging is often the people that eat more plant-based tend to exercise more, they tend to not smoke, they tend to not drink, they tend to be more health conscious. Whereas the Adventist health studies, everyone in the study is considered health conscious because they exercise regularly, they eat well by most people's definition. But even if you put the people that ate meat a little bit, as you're talking about, the overall nutrition was pretty good. Not a lot of fast food, not a lot of processed food, that kind of thing. So you're kind of taking out a lot of those confounding factors from other studies, which makes the nutrition kind of have more credit than other studies. Like I've seen people argue that before. So it's kind of an important part to put out with the Adventist health studies, that it's a health conscious population overall and then delineated by their diet. So that's why you get good results overall. Like the average person, regardless of their diet, that lives in that blue zone lives about 10 years. They're 10 times more likely to live to 100 than your average American. And their average life expectancy is about 10 years longer than the national average. So the average male lives to 89 and the average woman lives to 91. And as I said, they are years in good health. I remember meeting a surgeon that was in his 80s. And that was just like, to think that you can still do, and it was a neurosurgeon as well. I'm not going to say names or mention anyone. They weren't at Loma Linda. It was a different hospital I rotated at, but that was pretty cool. And he lived in Loma Linda his entire life. So pretty cool there. And incredible. So when we talk about, so what are some findings that we have that kind of separate them from the others? And a lot of the findings in the Adventist health study, I really like for helping people improve their diet, because most of the results are stepwise progressions. So because they separated them with, it depends which one. There's Adventist health study 1 and Adventist health study 2, and they're slightly different. But basically they tried to do vegan or entirely plant-based, vegetarian, pescatarian, semi-vegetarian, and then non-vegetarian. And that's how most of them are classified. And you actually see stepwise progressions or stepwise improvements as the diet moves towards being more plant-based, which is really cool. It's really nice to think that, just doing a little better can actually improve your health better. So once we can talk about type 2 diabetes, it's a really obvious one. It's about 60% less likely in those following a total plant-based or vegan nutritional pattern. High blood pressure being similar, about 75% less. Cholesterol lowers an awful lot. The risk, and then following that lower cholesterol, risk for heart disease was about 85% or more or less. And then body mass index, we talk about, I know that there's some flaws with the body mass index, but the actual only group that falls within a healthy weight range is those that are entirely plant-based. And given kind of the obesity epidemic in America for multitude of reasons, it's kind of interesting to see that they are the only ones that fall in that group. The average woman weighs about 40 pounds less than the non-vegetarian Adventist woman, so pretty significant difference.
That's quite a bit. And I think, with BMI, I think for each, if you talk at an individual basis, there's some flaws, but if you're kind of extrapolating it over a population, I think you can get some really good information out of that. Because
which is actually what the BMI is designed for. It was only ever designed to be used on a population level. And it had something to do, I believe it had to do with the rations, like who should get the most rations. And so they looked at BMI. It was never designed to be used on a personal level. So the reason we do that is kind of foolish. Things like waist circumference and body fat is a lot more accurate for health. But unfortunately, it seems like it's here to stay for some time. But it is helpful looking at population groups.
So I'll just go back to what you said before, that in the Adventist group, there was a difference of about 40 pounds between the person that ate a predominantly or exclusively plant-based diet and the non-vegetarian population. Correct. And these non-vegetarian populations ate quite small amounts of meat compared to what the standard American person would be eating.
Correct.
Yes.
To be classified in that high meat, the highest meat group, you only had to consume meat twice a week.
And there's still a
And
40-pound difference in weight, and
Yep.
just for that,
On
that's
average.
quite incredible. That's
Yeah,
quite incredible.
quite significant, and that's for a female too. So it's probably even more for males because males tend to weigh more, so the range can be larger.
Very
crazy.
interesting.
I just remember the female one off the top of my head because I counsel a lot of women.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you know, men, if I tell men, oh, they weigh 50 pounds less, they go, but I want to be big. You know, women, if I tell them they weigh less, they're down for that. So that's why I know the women's statistic off by heart.
Okay, and what other observations could you see in the differences between the dietary patterns there?
Absolutely. I think that going back to when I had the separate clinics, that can be really helpful too, because I was able to use plant-based nutrition as intervention. And that seemed to be able to, for a lot of people, cut that barrier and that difference in health just by changing nutrition. And a lot of them were limited in many ways. Like I said, you can't change your zip code, you can't change your job, you can't really change, you know, things like that overnight. And a lot of them were very limited in exercise because it wasn't safe for them to say walk outside. They couldn't afford a gym membership. So all we were doing was changing the nutrition. And that's when I was working with WIC, the Women, Infants and Children's. It's one of the food supplementation financial things in the US for women that are pregnant or have children under 5, and for the 5-year-olds. And we worked together to do a health promoting plant-based nutritional plan for them that would be less than $4 per day. And with the WIC, it came down to less than $3 a day if they were eligible for that. And so, and that was really because I actually started asking my patients, I said, how much money do you have to spend on food per week? And a lot of them were saying $30 or less. So I had to find something I could, you know, there's the kind of this myth in the US where Whole Foods is the only way to eat plant-based. And I love Whole Foods, but it is, you know, a little expensive. And a lot of these, but honestly, it's the more refined processed foods that are more expensive. And so it's a very basic plant-based nutrition plan. And that's why I was going to all those supermarkets, as I mentioned earlier, because I had to see what was for sale. I couldn't say, oh, go and get, I don't know, cherries or something, but they don't sell them. It's very basic. So we had to kind of work with what we had. And being able to use that, I used it for a lot of type 2 diabetics in particular did well, hypertension, kind of your real chronic lifestyle-based diseases. And I was able to see them get well. And it was really cool to see that it's not, you don't have to live in a blue zone. You know, you don't have to be raised that way. A lot of it, honestly, a lot of it came down to what they were eating, and changing to that, you know, Loma Linda style nutrition plan improved the health of those not living there.
Absolutely. And you hear this a lot as well, that, oh, you know, plant-based diets are very expensive. And, you know, any diet can be expensive depending on the different types of foods or products that you choose to purchase. But because people who are listening to this may be interested in saving some money. I mean, who isn't, right? So what were the types of foods that these people were eating that were enabling them to eat for $3 a day?
I actually have it for free on my website, so I can always give you the link for that.
We'll definitely be linking that. Yeah.
It isn't a downloadable PDF. I will do that one day when I learn more about my website. But at the moment, it is up there just as a blog post. But it kind of goes back to the basics of what I recommend eating for health for most people: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. That's, you know, they're some of the cheapest foods out there as it is. And you can lower those costs even further by, you know, not getting the pre-made rice, you know, buying a big bulk bag of brown rice instead of getting canned beans, buying, you know, the dried ones. Yeah, it's a little more inconvenient to cook them, but if saving money is your priority, not saving time, then you can cut the cost a lot there. And then fruits and vegetables wise, you know, going to discounted stores, I went to, like, you know, dollar store sells even organic fruits and vegetables, which was crazy. You know, frozen vegetables are, you know, just as nutritious for people. If it's the difference between not eating them and eating them, go ahead. You know, don't buy fresh berries. Frozen berries are so much cheaper. Things like that. And just looking at, you know, what's on sale. And I also figured out what times of day and, you know, what day of the week was cheaper and things like that. And it can actually make a really big difference when you're really tight for money.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've implemented. Like, we buy a lot of things in bulk, you know, because we know we're going to eat a lot, you know, of things like potatoes and sweet potatoes and bananas and rice and,
that
you
box
know,
of banana life.
the box of banana life is still going. But also, like, things that are in season, right? So fruits that are in season are going to be way cheaper than things that aren't. So when it's mango season, go and buy mangoes. Don't buy mangoes out of season when it's like $8 a mango or something like that, So
And eating locally as well, like California was
yeah,
great. There's a lot of fresh produce in
there
California.
is.
There's
There
actually a
is.
lot even you can just pick off trees, available. And that was one thing a lot of my patients were doing too, which is cool.
Mm.
But buying California oranges, don't buy. I saw the other day, believe it or not, I saw Australian oranges in the store. And I'm like, why do we have Australian oranges? Why are you here? Who invited you? But and they were triple the price of the California oranges. And I'm like, well, that makes sense because you had to ship them across the country. But also, I don't know, it seems crazy to me. So eating locally and eating seasonal, buying in bulk and getting, frozen things on sale can make a huge difference. And a lot of people didn't realize that they were eligible for food discount, which was another big thing. So I started asking people like, hey, have you looked in, we have, I think it's CalFresh, Snap, and then WIC. And a lot of people were eligible for it. They didn't even know. And that can go a long way. Some of those vouchers are $40 for fruits and vegetables per week. Like that's a huge.
Whoa.
So now they went from a budget of $30 per week to now they have $70 a week. Like
it's more than doubled their budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That automatically improves your nutrition. So.
And one of my biggest gripes is why is healthy food more expensive in a lot of times? We know that there's subsidies for these industries that produce. Again, that also boggles my mind. Like, why are we subsidizing unhealthy food and not subsidizing the healthy food?
Especially in Australia. I can't tell you how much berries I ate when I moved to California, and what used to cost me $12 in Australia now costs me $2. So I don't know what's happening in Australia with the produce market there, but there's got to be some markup somewhere, and I don't know where it's coming from. But a punnet of blueberries shouldn't cost $12 in anyone's world. But then I also feel bad for the farmers because they're probably not getting it either. So I don't know where that's coming from, but it is really sad that there is those subsidies, those checkoffs and subsidies going towards foods that are not promoting health for people.
Yeah. In season they are cheaper. I think you can get blueberry, it's only a small punnet though, 125 grams of blueberries for, sometimes you can get them for $3 for that small punnet. But it's still when you compare it to if I go to Aldi, for example, and I get 500 grams of blueberries for $5,
yeah, it's a big difference.
Makes a big difference. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So in terms of what you were seeing, I'm really fascinated because one of my goals is to live a very healthy life, and I don't care how long I live. I just want to be healthy until the time comes. So what were you seeing in these older people who had a very healthy dietary pattern? What were the differences in the way they were living their life and what they were able to do physically compared to maybe another 80-year-old who's been on a more standard American diet and is on lots of medications and they're still the same age, but there's differences, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly, it's a completely different picture that you paint. If we talk about, let's go with your typical following the standard American diet. Let's say they're 50, right? And they've come into my office for an annual physical. And I talk to them, I do their vitals. Their blood pressure's high most of the time. Not crazy, but it's up there. It's higher than it should be. We go over their basic labs. Their cholesterol's high. Sometimes as they're getting older, you might see renal function or kidney function decline a little bit. There's often anemia because there's something else going on in the body. B12 is often low, and the labs are not painting a great picture. There's often chronic inflammation. If they don't have diabetes already, there's pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, just setting up for this difficultness. And then, like I said, high blood pressure, typically overweight. The average American is overweight or obese, which is challenging. That contributes to a whole lot of other health problems. And then what else am I doing? And then we start going through, and there's often an autoimmune disease going on. The amount of people I saw with autoimmune diseases at my primary care clinic was mind-blowing. And I think it just comes down to all those factors playing in. It's an unhealthy environment. They're not eating well. They're not physically active. A lot of them were in very sad and difficult situations, be that family or financial or work-wise. And a lot of mental health comes with that: depression, anxiety, drug use, overuse of alcohol. And I would see someone that's 50 and they're they're not able to do even close to what the 80-year-old is doing. You know, the 80-year-old comes in, let's say they're coming in for their annual physical, they have almost no medical, sorry, before I even go on to that, the biggest part was, how are they feeling? Tired, sluggish, fatigued, low motivation, you know, chronic digestive problems, you know, constipation, GI upset, nausea, you know, joints are hurting, necks hurting, headaches, poor vision, shortness of breath, you know, skin problems, you know, acne, psoriasis, it just goes on and on and on. The body is just not doing okay. And it's really sad. And I loved my job in a way because there was so many things that could get better. And it was very motivating to come to work because I felt like I was doing something. And I had a really good bond with a lot of my patients because we had they could get so much better. I worked there for nearly 5 years. And so some of them I had for 5 years. I'd, you know, deliver their baby, see them 5 years later. There's a lot of really cool things going on there. But it was such a different person. So going on to what I was saying with the other person, they're just coming in because they think it's a good idea to get an annual physical. It's very encouraged in the United States. And, you know, I look at their labs and they're perfect. Their cholesterol's in that, you know, that less than 150 kind of heart attack proof number that gets talked about. You know, their A1C or their diabetes markers are normal. Their metabolic panel, their complete blood count, everything looks great. I have nothing I can tell them on their labs other than good work. Keep up the good work. Clearly it's working for you because you're 80, you know, and then they, you know, there's energy, there's sprightliness, you know, clear skin, clear, you know, clear, bright eyes, good dental hygiene, feeling good. The skin is clear. There isn't like rashes and itchiness and things going on there. You know, hair is gray, but it's silky and it looks great. And a lot of them had long hair still, which you don't see a lot in a lot, you know, because it was healthy, it was thick, it could grow long, you know, slim with muscle definition, able to get out of their chair. Sounds like a crazy thing to say, but one of the number one reasons to go into a nursing home is not able to get out of a chair, you know, and that it's such a small thing, but it's something I focus on because that can be independent life versus not if you can't get out of a chair. You know, they kind of spring out of their chair, they're exercising regularly, they're social, they're happy. And it's such a different population, really, really was. And that's not to say that that's exclusive. That's a very generalization. But, you know, you kind of asked the question, and that would be the stereotypical difference that I was seeing.
Yeah, I think it's important for people listening to this to realize that, you know, even with the way we've been able to you know, create medical technology to help people live a longer life, it doesn't mean they're living a comfortable life, you know. And so it's very prudent for people to realize that, you know, if we think about our diet and our lifestyle as a whole package, and we say, well, you know, what do we want when we get to 50? Do we want to be that person that you were explaining that has all these issues? And you know, no matter how you try and spin it, they're not really comfortable the majority of the time, you know. Like I remember almost 10 years ago when I was 27 and I was on 4 different medications, right? You know, I was antibiotics for acne, I had this fungal thing on my foot, I had headaches, you know, there was one other one as well, I can't really remember, but hay fever.
Yeah, and that's totally normal. That's a normal 27-year-old these days. Like that's not even abnormal. It's very normal. And the thing is, like, that person often doesn't want to be there either, but they don't know a way out. And I think that a lot of times there's a lot of blame thrown, like, oh, that person's, you know, lazy and they eat bad. But they're usually doing what they think is best. It's just unfortunate that they don't know how to be healthy. And I'm sure you probably fell in that category.
I thought I was healthy, you know, when I got my labs, the doctor said, good work, you know. You know, so I looked, my blood work was fine, but I wasn't fine on the inside, you know, and I looked fine. I was going to the gym, you know, like, you know, reasonably muscly, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, on the outside, you wouldn't know anything was wrong, but I had headaches and migraines and, you know, I would dread every time spring came around because I'd, you know, like spraying the stuff on my nose and sneezing. I mean, I still get a bit of hay fever now and then, but it's nowhere near, like I used to be like non-stop sneezing and runny nose and stuff like that. And so to see the difference in my life now where I'm on no medications, I mean, I haven't taken a Panadol for 9 years, you know.
Awesome.
You know, I haven't taken a pill for 9 years. And just like now I'll be 30, How old will I be this year? 37, 36 or 37 this year?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I must be, I think it's, yeah, 37 this year. And like, it's, to think that it's me 10 years since I was that person, I feel better now than when I was
Mm-hmm.
27,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Isn't
and
that
it just
crazy?
blows my mind to think that my health has actually improved from my 20s when normally you don't see that happening. Um, and I think it's a very, very kind of interesting explanation of how someone who's 80, you know, like even though that's a numbers and age, like physiologically they're actually younger than the person who's 50, you know, like in terms of their
Mhm.
overall well-being. um that's fascinating.
It's crazy. And I think that, even though for you, you started relatively young, 27 is relatively young,
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that it actually doesn't matter. It's never too late to
It's
start,
never too late.
and I think there's two important things that you had said that I noted is it's not a cure-all. Like you still get some hay fever, right? And I'm very open with people because I still get asthma. A lot of people go plant-based and don't get asthma. Unfortunately, that wasn't for me, but I can only imagine how bad it would be if I wasn't. Like, because I see what happens when people go plant-based. Severe asthma goes plant-based, almost always gets better. I couldn't imagine being that person that was doing that. So I think it's important to note that like it may not be a cure-all, but a lot of things get better. Sometimes you have a little bit that sticks, but some things you completely resolve. Like you said, your headache's completely resolved, right? You just got stuck with a little hay fever. Cool,
Yeah,
totally different life.
but my
And
hay
then
fever now is better than when I used to.
mhm,
I don't take medication for it, and it's better than when I
exactly.
used to take
Mhm,
medication for it, and that's
right.
mind-blowing for me. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I think that's so important. It's like,
Mm.
cool, because you'll hear people, oh, we used to have hay fever. It's like, yeah, but it's so minimal that I like don't even care about it anymore.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then to think, what I think is important, because sometimes people think, oh, I'm old, it's too late for me. And it's really not. And we see that in so many of the studies, especially Dr. Esselstein's heart disease ones.
Mm.
Some of those people were 80, and they were only just starting their health journey at 80, and they got well and they lived longer and lived healthier and they felt better than they did when they were much younger. And I think it's really cool. And I have seen some amazing health transformations, especially in later life. And it's
Mm.
just life-changing for them. They say, I feel better than I did when I was a teenager. And it's so cool to see. And I think that that's just so important, is like never give up. Like it always
Mm.
gets better. And sometimes things take time. I think some people want that magic bullet. We live in medicine being the antibiotic age where, a pill for every ill, and it doesn't quite work that way. It might take some time, but it continues to improve. And sometimes people don't think they're making changes, and then you look back and you're like, oh wow, like I'm totally different. And I think that's really
Mm.
important to recognize.
Mm.
Never too late, always gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think moving on to the other topic that we wanted to discuss today, and we'll kind of touch on it briefly, but I think for our audience especially, they're very interested in some of the research and the studies. You were talking about, that 50-year-old that comes in, all sorts of digestive issues. I think the majority of people have digestive issues, but they just normalize it. Okay, that's just supposed to happen, or it's okay, or whatever. I had lots of digestive issues. We don't publicize that as much as what my brother's story is, because he had the extreme version of the digestive issues. But even in my 20s, I had lots of issues with my digestion, and that's all resolved. But let's go through the relationship between diet and IBD, because so many people go to the GI, and it is changing slowly, but the vast majority of GIs will say diet has nothing to do with your IBD. And it's kind of like, I was talking to Dr. Clapper a couple of days ago, and he was like, how can something that's literally in contact with that part of your body not have anything to do with your disease? And so let's go through like some of the main things. And I think, when you wrote your article, there was a recent study by have you seen that one by Dr. Chiba, the most recent release that he came out with, where he's tracking
Probably.
people on plant-based diet for 5 years. And
Yes.
after 5 years of intervention, there was 88% of them that still stayed in remission. I think
Very cool.
that's huge. When you think about the fact that most biologic drugs have an efficacy rate of 35%, that's a big difference. So let's just talk about what are some of the stuff you found, and kind of, you know, yeah, what the research showed when you'd actually looked into the topic of diet and IBD.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so sad that we live in this world. We have immunosuppressants, immunotherapy, monoclonals, chemotherapy. There's so many biological agents, so many things, then they try and suppress the symptoms. You've got steroids, you've got your glucocorticoids, just all these treatments. And unfortunately, sustained remission has not yet happened using all of these things. And I'm definitely not anti them. I think people should try whatever works for them, especially in the beginning. Sometimes it's hard to just calm things down before the nutritional start working. But we're looking at symptom relief, potentially some short remission, and preventing progression. We're not looking at that curative or that sustained remission, which is, it's really sad. And I'm glad to see that it is moving. And I totally agree with what Dr. Clapper is saying. Nutrition is a multiple time per day exposure. Even if you're taking medications, you're eating more often than you're taking your medication. So it's so crazy. It's the same as saying, if I put something on my skin, it's not going to matter. Like, of course it matters. So I guess, my article is long. I have another article that I wrote that I haven't put out yet as well. So there's so many things.
Well, you have to send it to me.
I will. It was more, I tried to summarize it. And so I'll try and, kind of go over it, but it looks at your general patterns. So let's talk general patterns, things like high animal products. We find that from traditional Asian, traditional African cultures, almost no IBD. Even around war times and famine times, things like IBD got much better because animal products are rationed at that time. What do those foods do? They're increasing your pro-inflammatory parts of your body, your interleukin-6, your C-reactive protein, your homocysteine, versus something like whole grains and fruits, which lower them. We look at that Western dietary pattern. What's it full of? Calories, fats, animal protein, salt, refined sugars, processed foods. What's it low in? Fruits, vegetables, fibers. And we see a significant correlation with those type. And it's just the way that there's so many reasons why it directly increases inflammation. It alters that immune balance, that CD4 regulatory T cells as well, that are so important in the autoimmune disease process. Your intestinal microbiota, or microbiome, as it's kind of more commonly known as, even indirectly increasing body fat mass, which is pro-inflammatory and in and of itself. Just all of those things combined are just a recipe for disaster if we're talking about inflammatory bowel disease and the start of it. So kind of going into your food groups to keep it more clarified, your fast foods, highly processed, high fat, high sugar, all of those patterns have found significant differences. We're talking, 300% increases in things like Crohn's and colitis, just from looking at that dietary pattern compared to someone following a more plant-based dietary pattern. Similarly, high sugar consumption, again, your risk ratios are 2.6, which is almost, again, it's like over 250% more likely to have inflammatory bowel diseases.
And just to, that's not sugar from fruit. That's not sugar from fruit.
We're talking refined sugar.
Yes.
Sorry. I forget because I talk about it so much.
Yeah,
we're talking processed refined sugars. And honestly, when we see studies of sugar, it's almost always combined with saturated fat. And I like to point that out to people because no one is eating table sugar really to an extent. And that's not causing the problem. I believe it's because it's combined with saturated fat. The study that they talk about a lot, no one's going to eat cream, no one's going to eat sugar, mix them together and everyone's going to eat ice cream. And that's why I think that sugar gets so kind of thrown under the bus a lot. But no, we're absolutely not talking. Fruit is on the complete other side. We're talking about the bad stuff right now, or the stuff that should be minimal. Fruit is the complete opposite.
No, the only reason I mentioned that, the only reason I mentioned that is because a lot of people talk about fruit and sugar, and they just say, oh, fruit has sugar, so don't eat fruit. And so, yeah, you haven't heard that? That's quite
never, no, of course.
Okay.
No. Fruit is completely different. I mean, you look at the number one thing that can improve I'm more familiar with American studies now, but the number one thing that improves American health is eating more fruit. It's the number one risk factor for disease, and number one risk reduction for disease, and number one associated with longevity is fruit consumption.
Fruit consumption, yeah.
Yep.
It's the one, not eating enough fruit is the number one risk factor for all sorts of different things. It's unreal. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's carry on. So
no, that's important. Thank you for stopping me because.
And maybe we'll just kind of do a little recap here. So the things that increase your risk factors for IBD is animal proteins, high fat diets, refined processed foods, refined sugars, And another thing that can do it as well is having your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it gets debated. Omega-3s are such a hot topic, and that fatty acid balance gets debated all the time. I was taught the two pathways that compete with each other. You have omega-6 on one side, pro-inflammatory, omega-3 on the other side, anti-inflammatory, and they use similar enzymes to get them to go ahead to their next steps. And I was always told that they compete. And so if you have too much in omega-6, it's pro-inflammatory, and you're not able to create enough omega-3, especially on a plant-based diet when you're relying on, say, arachidonic acid to go to omega-3. If you consume too much omega-6, you're lowering your omega-3. That's what I was always taught. I've seen some new research that tries to debate that. I haven't seen anything convincing, because I see that people that have a better ratio are much healthier and they do much better. So until I see more convincing research and more convincing clinical actual, because you also see the thing where, like, something that's in a research study isn't always clinically relevant. And by clinically relevant, I mean, is it improving someone's health and are they feeling better? Because that's what's more important to me. Like, my patients don't care what the studies say. They just want to feel good. They want their labs to look good. They want their health to feel good. And they want to feel like they're healthy people.
Well, I think where this whole omega-3 thing is coming from is that because people are consuming such a diet so high in omega-6, the ratio is so out of whack. And instead of telling people to reduce their omega-6 to improve the ratio, we're telling them to supplement with omega-3 so their ratio can get better. And I think, well, okay, that's fine, but you're still eating these foods high in omega-6, then they don't want too much of that. So why don't we instead say, okay, well, let's make your diet healthier. Let's reduce the omega-6 so that your ratio improves, and then automatically you'll get better absorption of omega-3 anyway, because as you said, that pathway competes.
Absolutely. We see the same with studies on low-fat diets, and they're 35% fat, and they're saying a low-fat diet doesn't work. I'm like, 35% was never a low-fat diet. And it completely, and you see it goes from clinical study to headline that's sensationalism. Low-fat diets don't work. I'm like, hold on, we didn't study a low-fat diet. What happened? Before medicine, I was a journalist. I know all the tricks of the trade. So trust me, I know what we write. It's not what the clinical study said. So.
So and what did the research say, I guess, as we finish off the session, what does the research show that's going to be helpful to prevent and treat people got IBD, like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease?
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest one that I think is important, and I know that you guys know this, but it's addressing a huge myth, is increased fiber intake. And that fiber not coming from supplements, that fiber coming from fruit and vegetable intake, whole grains, beans and legumes as tolerated. And, I kind of go through in the article how you get there, because a lot of people, especially in acute illness, they can't just go ahead and eat beans and rice. It's not going to happen. But moving towards that. So prevention, 100%, that's what's prevention, as plant-based as possible, focusing on those 4 foods: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. Best you can do for prevention, keeping everything else a bare minimum. Obviously, I tell people generally follow the least restrictive diet that gets you healthy, because you don't need to go to extremes. But my version of extreme is different to other people's version of extreme. I think the majority of people should eat as well as they possibly can. And so that's kind of your number one thing, is increase. And that fiber thing I mentioned, because often people with inflammatory bowel diseases are told to decrease their fiber. And it's kind of, in the beginning, it feels good, right? Because the gut is so sensitive that, some of those softer, lower fiber foods, they don't hurt. White rice being a good example for a lot of people, it doesn't hurt. But you're hurting yourself in the long term, because you're not feeding your gut microbiome. You're not providing those prebiotics to be able to have a healthy gut population that will keep you in remission or prevent you from the problems getting worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. So absolutely. Eat more plants, basically. But a very important thing that you mentioned there, because when you've got active disease in the body, you have a lot of bleeding, you have a lot of diarrhea, and frequency of stools is quite high. You have to be quite careful about what you eat. And so what we do is we say, first of all, especially if you're coming from a meat heavy diet, let's cut out the worst offenders first, and get to a plant-based diet that still has a reasonable amount of variety, because you're coming from a varied diet, but also kind of some of the softer fibers, some of the more easier to digest fibers. Let's cut out like raw vegetables and leafy greens, let's get those rougher kind of things out of your system. and focus mainly on like soft fruits for breakfast, or maybe like even a smoothie for breakfast to start your day, and then you go to meals that are cooked, predominantly cooked, but you know, you're focusing on potatoes and sweet potatoes and pumpkins and squash and soft cooked veggies like broccoli, and you know, maybe a little bit of brown rice, if you can tolerate it. And then from there, depending on how your symptoms resolve, if you need to go on a more restrictive diet, then you can transition towards that until you get some kind of remission. And once you've got that remission and the bleeding stopped and you're feeling better, then you can start to slowly phase in the different foods till you've kind of got to a very sustainable way of eating. And so that's kind of how we do it, and it's very effective. It's amazing how people get better. It's incredible.
Absolutely. It's virtually the same as what I do. Very, very similar. And we've had great results. And like you say, and the patients themselves, as well as sometimes me, like it's incredible. The humans ability, oh my gosh, I can't talk. The human body's ability to heal when given the right fuel, when placed in the right environment, is incredible. And I always, whenever someone would come to see me, no matter how sick they are, I'm like, believe in your human body's ability to heal. Give it the right things, you know, eat the right food, move your body, sleep well, reduce your stress, have a purpose, and have your support system, and you will go a long way. No matter how sick you are, you will improve. You can. You're doing all the right things. And we know in life, when you do the right things, it eventually pays off.
Yeah, and people ask us all the time, like, you know, you will get a question saying, oh, this is what's going on in my life right now. Should I start now or should I wait until? I'm like, there's never a bad time to start eating healthier. You know, like just make, you know, like it's never the wrong time to make healthier choices in your life. So yeah, the best time to start, well, maybe it was 5 years ago, maybe even longer than that. But the second best time to start is right now, you know? Yeah. Absolutely.
I know. I always sound, I feel a little silly, but people are like, when's the best time for me to start? I was like, yesterday, but it's okay because you're here now. So we're going to start today. But you're totally right. And I think that gets missed is that even, you know, there's even studies showing that eating well and doing whatever you can actually helps you mentally cope with stress and have different responses to stress. So even if you're at the worst time of your life, eating food that isn't fueling your body well is only worsening the problem. So whatever you can do, and maybe you just pick one thing to prioritize. Maybe you're going to work on eating less meat or something. Like all of those things add up, and you'll actually be able to cope better than if you just ate whatever and ate stress promoting foods, you know. Absolutely. And then, you know, who wants to be stressed out and have digestive problems at the same time? Like,
yeah, and then it's like a vicious cycle. Then you're stressed out, now you got digestive system. Now you're stressed out by your digestive system, you know, digestive problems, and yeah, it's just like it just compounds. You know,
exactly. Like it's going to be a lot better if you don't have those digestive problems.
And something we do talk about is like the relationship with your mind. You know, the vagus nerve is connected to the brain and the gut, and so, you know, just starting to shift your mind and find more peace in your life can actually reduce your symptoms, and you'd be surprised to see how much of a difference that makes in people's lives. Just trying
we are a connected system, that's for
take
sure.
a deep breath. You know, just start with taking a deep breath and just trying to stay calm as long as you possibly can, and that definitely helps.
Absolutely, you're totally right. I mean, we like the crazy things you have to learn are the parts of the body in medical school, but the thing that always stands out to me is we're all connected. The nervous system goes from the top to the bottom. Everything is connected. You can't do one thing in the human body because we're all connected.
We're not a robot.
All one. That sounds really hippie. We're all, you know, but you know what I'm saying? Like as a biological system, we're all connected. So it's super
I mean, I always tell someone, there's something wrong in one part of the body, there's something wrong everywhere, because it doesn't just work like we're not a robot, we're not like compartmentalized, and so you have to, the solution is holistic. You have to look at the whole body and do the things that are going to resolve the root cause of the problem, which is manifesting in a particular area, you know.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, medicine has become very compartmentalized, and it's because it's become so advanced that you can't expect one doctor to know everything about every body part. But looking at the whole picture is usually how you get to the root of the problem. So it's very challenging.
Yeah. That's why I think lifestyle medicine that needs to be really promoted a lot more. in the medical field. Like you still have your specialist for a specific thing, but I think the first thing someone should do is be seen by a lifestyle practitioner who can give them something to do, like an overall solution, and yeah, try this first, and then if it doesn't resolve, then we can go and see the specialist, you know, or you don't feel better in a couple of months, and come back again, and we'll kind of get you to a specialist. But yeah, it's not the way it is at 100% at the
Absolutely.
moment. Yeah.
It needs to change. I mean, it's growing in the United States now. A lot of the curriculum, the residencies are teaching the LMRC, or lifestyle medicine residency curriculum. So residents in America are your post medical school training. It's a little bit different, like in names, to Australia and New Zealand, but you're basically called a resident the whole time you're in training here. And in that, they're giving a 2-year course on lifestyle medicine to all residents.
Fantastic.
And it's a lot, like it's a couple of hours a week. And
Fantastic.
that's teaching to be that foundation. They're teaching it in medical school. At Loma Linda, even in medical school, you can do a lifestyle medicine track. A lot of the residency programs, like including mine, had a lifestyle medicine track. It's really becoming that baseline. And then if you do the lifestyle medicine residency curriculum, you're eligible to take your board exam and be board certified in lifestyle medicine. So it is growing.
Yeah.
And it makes such a difference. My research was with teaching medical students about it, and they not only change their professional behaviors with their patients, they change their personal behaviors as well, just going through it. So you're having healthier doctors, and we know from the studies a healthier doctor is more likely to talk to their patients about a healthy lifestyle. With you, like a doctor that exercises or a doctor that eats well is more likely to tell their patients to do that, and it just keeps going. You know, people get healthier, and it's really,
it's so
really
much
cool
more
where it's
rewarding,
going.
right? Like you don't come into medicine to just be a dispenser of drugs or medication, right? You want to come in there to make an impact on people's lives. I mean, I don't think I know any doctor who actually decided to go into medicine to write prescriptions. Like, we go in there because we want to get people to be healthy, and I'm very lucky in what I do. I get to see from the beginning to the end a lot of the, you know, I mean, very intensive. And you know, when I talk to doctors, they're like, I wish I could do that. But like with lifestyle medicine, you get the opportunity to actually impact someone's life in a much more positive way, which I think is I mean, that's why so many more doctors are being drawn to it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the rotate, like when you're going through training, you rotate a lot through different areas. And some days, honestly, I felt like a receptionist and a pill dispenser. All I was doing all day long was writing prescriptions, I would sit at a computer for 8 hours a day, typing and answering phone calls. That was all I did, and answering pages all day long. I saw my patients for maybe 10 minutes each. And that would be a good day. Some of them 2 minutes. And that was the only time. This is mostly like hospital based. That would be the only time I even saw my patients. And then the rest of the time I was like, you know, looking at labs, you know, ordering electrolytes, ordering medications. And I do love it because it still helped people get better, but I don't get that same reward of, I say this is a joke, but like my favorite day is when my patients don't need me anymore because they're well. And it's such a rewarding thing when I have lots and lots of people, but I used to see them all the time because they were so sick. I'd be sick every week. They'd be on my schedule, sometimes twice a week. And I didn't care because I knew they needed it. And I would see them so much. And then it would be once a month. And then it was once every 3 months. And then 2 years later, I'd see them. I'm like, why are you here? And they're like, oh, I had a baby. And you're like, wow, like you're healthy. And it's the best thing that they've taken control of their own life, and they don't need to be at the doctor all the time. I mean, we're still here if you need us, if you have an accident or something, but it's so much more rewarding for me personally to see that journey, and that now they're well. It's so cool.
Absolutely. And that's the best thing. That's what I love is about what we have the opportunity to do in our line of work, is actually make a positive impact on people's health, and let them to take control. When someone takes control of their own health, now I have that power. It's incredible. Yeah, it's just beautiful. Okay.
It is. Yeah. And going back to stress, so much less stressful. You don't have to worry about your refills or your doctor canceling on you, your doctor running late,
it's
50
cheaper.
Hours of doctors, being hospitalized, and cheaper. And lots and lots of money. Health insurance in America is expensive. You know, it's definitely cheaper. So I mean, your job, I absolutely love what you guys are doing. It's like so changing the lives of so many people, and it's just every single person needs to go and see you guys. Those kind of, no, but seriously, I tell a lot of patients about your program. You have great resources out there. You know, it's absolutely works. It's like, what have you got to lose? You're just eating healthier.
You really don't have anything to lose. Yeah, absolutely.
No
All
side
right.
effects like a lot of the
No side effects.
medications.
Yep, no side effects. All right. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. We've gone a little bit over time, but thank you so much for taking the time to share
Not too
this
much.
information. Oh, no. I mean, it's such important information. I mean, we could probably go on for another hour, but we've got things we've got people to see. But look, it's like, yeah, so the research that you've shared and the experiences, because I think people relate to experiences more than actual studies, is really important to see the observations that you've had. And please send me that article that you've written. I'd love to read it.
Absolutely.
But for everyone who's been watching or on YouTube or listening on the podcast, thank you so much, and I hope you've really gained something. I'm sure you have. I mean, it's some amazing information that Renae shared with us. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and click the little bell notification icon so you get all the updates of our recent videos. And yes, as Renae said, hit the like button too. If you've got any questions, comment down below, and we'll get to them as best as we can. Yeah, I mean, I'll say thank you so much, Renae. Any final words?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. As you can tell, I talk a lot. I'm very passionate, and I just love what you guys are doing, and being able to support that and getting out things that can actually help people. So thank you for your support
absolutely.
as well.
I sincerely hope we get to meet sooner rather than later. But keep up all the amazing work that you're doing as well, and all the great resources that you're sharing with everyone. And again, thank you so much for your time. For everyone who's watching, make sure you eat plants and lots of them. Take care.